Hi everybody, Jeff here. Just wanted to take some time to talk through today something a bit more personal. I guess what I'm calling the 3 aha moments of my consulting career. Now, for some context, prior to being a consultant, I was an IT infrastructure architect, engineer. I did design, build, implement, support for servers, storage, networking, Microsoft Stack, Exchange, SQL, but very deep technical roles. And I only joined a consulting firm about 3.5, 4 years ago. Now, when I joined, it was certainly really challenging, and I certainly think that I suffered from imposter syndrome, being surrounded by really intelligent, high-performing people all the time while trying to figure out what the heck I was doing. Now, throughout that process, I had 3 kind of really major events that didn't seem major at the time, but looking back, affected how I thought about myself and how I became a good consultant, I guess. The first was, ironically enough, a self-assessment piece that we do called Lifestyles Inventory. Now, there's 2 parts to this. There's a self-assessment followed by a 360 assessment by a group of your peers, and it rates your behaviours on red, green and blue behaviours, red being aggressive, green being passive defensive, blue being humanistic, encouraging. Now, going into that, I had a view of myself as a very technically minded perfectionist, not great with people. And when I did my self-assessment, I guess a lot of that came through, and a lot of my scores were quite low, and in chatting to the person doing it, it was really a reflection of my confidence at the time. Now, about 3 months later, I did my 360 feedback, and the results were almost the polar opposite. They were massively out in the blue areas, which are all around humanistic behaviours, and my top trait was actually being humanistic and encouraging, which suggests that I'm very people-focused and, to be honest, good with people. Looking at that, I was quite surprised. Looking back at it now, not really. I think that in general I like helping people, I like working with people. I just didn't think of myself that way. So I think that second assessment was probably one of my first aha moments. My second moment probably must have been about 18 months later. Now, I was thinking about promotion at the stage and thinking about what the characteristics I had and hadn't for that type of role, and one of them was really about developing people and looking after and building team members, and I didn't think I did that very well, to be honest. And I ended up going out for a beer with some really good colleagues down in Wellington who are advisors, who I sort of had a bit of a cry to, and who sat back and said, "Dude, what the hell are you talking about? You are one of the few people that actually listens to us, cares about what we are doing, asks us about what we're working on and what it means." And again, really looking back, yeah, I do those things, and those are things that I do quite naturally, but I was telling myself that, I wasn't good at these things. So actually having some of those team members actually sit me down and say, "Dude, no, you're completely wrong," was actually incredibly valuable to me from a development perspective. My third aha moment, and it probably builds on the other 2, was a discussion I had with my dad. Now, I was doing a lot of work on myself, thinking about, I really struggled taking compliments. Whenever anyone said, "Hey, you did a good job," or "Hey, this went really well," I would always find a way to undermine that compliment. And if this resonates with you, you should think about reading into perfectionist behavior. But I would always think about how the person giving that compliment, they don't really know, they haven't seen this before, or, "Yeah, it was okay, but I could have done this." So I was working on that and decided to have a chat with my dad. Now, luckily, my dad happens to be an organizational psychologist. And as soon as I started talking about it, he said, "Yep, that's what I've had for the last 65 years. And it was a really amazing discussion to have with someone who actually thought exactly the same way, had gone through exactly the same challenges. And it was all about achievement motivation and always wanting to be achieving and measuring your self-worth on what you can achieve. And it's tied, I think, quite closely to perfectionism, in that you could always do more and you could always do more. Now, if you put those 2 behaviors together, they can be a fantastic motivator, but they can also be incredibly self-destructive, because you never actually get to where you think you can get to. You never actually are as good as you want to be. So I worked a lot on that, both with my dad. I used, things like self-affirmations, which are incredibly woo to me, but they really made a difference. And I think that really changed my mindset completely about my self-worth and what I do for a living and how I approach my work. So I guess those are the three things, if I look back in my consulting career, that have really got me to where I am today. Without any of those three, I don't think I'd be where I am. So those are my three. I hope you found this insightful and useful. Talk to you again next time.